Okay, welcome back, everyone. Let's dive right in for this deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're heading to a really legendary battlefield, Kurukshetra.
Mm-hmm. The big one.
But we're not actually looking at the fighting itself, not yet anyway. We're focusing on something much earlier.
That's right. We're dialing it back. We're zooming in on this single, really pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Right before the war truly ignites.
Exactly. That kind of charged quiet before the storm. The air is thick with tension. You can almost feel it. And we're basing this discussion on some really fascinating source notes and analysis you shared.
Yeah, these sources, they sort of drop us right onto the field just as these massive armies are finally lined up facing each other. It's quite a scene.
And our mission today, our goal for this deep dive, is to really unpack what these specific notes reveal about that one instant.
Exactly. We want to look closely at how it's described, the perspective we're given, and the actions of one really key figure right then.
It's all about that pause, isn't it? The breath held just before everything changes. So what's really interesting is how the source material actually frames our view of the specific moment. Where does it position us, narratively speaking?
Well, the notes really highlight this clearly. Our perspective comes specifically through the, well, not eyes exactly, but the words of Sanjaya.
Ah, Sanjaya.
Yes. The text itself, according to the notes, kicks off with that classic marker, Sanjaya Uvacha, which basically means Sanjaya said or Sanjaya speaks.
Okay, so it's explicitly telling us he's the one reporting what's happening.
Precisely. He's our narrator on the ground, so to speak, describing the events as they unfold.
Sanjaya, he's the one with the divine sight, right? Granted the ability to see the whole war, even from afar.
That's the traditional understanding, yeah. He has this unique vantage point. And who is he actually speaking to in this specific passage that the source material focuses on?
Good question. The notes mention he's addressing someone called O Emperor, or sometimes Maharaja.
Right. And the context, both from the wider text and what the analysis points out, is that he's speaking directly to Dhritarashtra.
The blind king, father of the Kauravas.
Exactly. So Sanjaya is essentially giving a live, blow-by-blow account of the scene on the battlefield to the king, miles away.
Wow. So we're basically listening in on this real-time report being relayed directly to the father of, well, one of the main antagonists, you could say.
You could. And speaking of that main figure on the Kaurava side, how does Sanjaya actually refer to Duryodhana when he's talking to Dhritarashtra here? Is it formal?
It's actually quite personal, isn't it? The notes say Sanjaya calls him simply, your son.
Your son. That's powerful.
It really is. It immediately grounds the whole thing, doesn't it? It reminds you, like the analysis points out, that this isn't just some abstract military report.
Right. It's information being delivered to a, well, probably very anxious parent about his own child standing on the brink of this immense battle.
That simple phrase, your son, just cuts through the epic scale and makes it intensely personal. It really sharpens the focus, pulls you right into the emotional weight behind the strategic moment.
Absolutely. It sets a very specific tone right from the start.
So, okay, Sanjaya is there narrating the scene for Dhritarashtra. What's the very first significant detail about the battlefield itself that Sanjaya reports? What does he focus on first, according to this specific passage our source highlights?
His initial focus, his first observation that's recorded here, lands squarely on the opposing army. He sees the Pandava army. The term used is Pandavanikam.
Pandamika, the army of the Pandavas. And what's their state? How does he describe them at this exact moment? Are they just, arriving, setting up camp?
No, not at all. The description Sanjaya gives is very specific, and it carries significant weight. He sees them already arranged in a definite military formation, an array.
An array, okay.
The source uses this specific Sanskrit term.
Vyuha. Okay, that sounds technical. What does that term really signify here based on the analysis provided in the notes?
The notes really emphasize this point. Vyuha means they are systematically arranged, organized, deployed in proper military formations.
So not just a random gathering of soldiers.
Definitely not. It means they are prepared, they're structured, they're ready for battle. They have a plan, and their formation reflects that. They're lined up, in position, signaling very clearly their intent and their readiness to fight.
Wow. That one word, Vyuha, it packs a punch then. It tells us immediately the Pandavas aren't just showing up. They are demonstrating their preparedness, their discipline, visually, right from the get-go.
Exactly. It's the very first thing Sanjaya highlights about them in this passage, this state of structured readiness. Their military discipline is on full display.
So the source tells us they are arrayed, yeah, but you mentioned the source analysis also points out what this specific passage doesn't say. What are the details that are conspicuously absent here?
Yeah, this is a really key point that the analysis brings out. While Vyuha tells us that they are in formation, this particular excerpt, the specific bit of source material we're looking at, deliberately doesn't give us the kind of details you might expect in, say, a full military briefing.
Like what kind of details?
Well, for instance, it doesn't specify the exact size of the Pandava army at this point. It doesn't break down the composition, how many chariots, elephants, infantry divisions. It doesn't name the individual commanders leading the different parts of that formation.
Okay.
And maybe most interestingly, it doesn't even tell us the type of formation they've adopted. Was it the Garuda Vyuha, the eagle formation? Or the Chakra Vyuha, the wheel? Or something else? This passage doesn't say.
That is interesting. So the focus here isn't on the tactical blueprint itself, the specifics of how they're arranged.
Not at this exact moment, no.
It's more about the simple but powerful fact that the Pandavas are formed up, that they are ready. It highlights the perception of their readiness, maybe, more than the intricate details of the strategy.
I think that's a great way to put it. The focus, in this particular part of the narrative, seems to be squarely on the state of the opposing army, their organized readiness, and crucially, what that state immediately triggers in the observer on the other side.
And that observer is?
Specifically, King Duryodhana, Raja Duryodhana, as the text calls him.
Right, Raja Duryodhana. So, okay, picture this. Duryodhana, the king, scans the field, and he sees this. He sees the Pandava army, not in disarray, but perfectly arrayed, puta, ready. What is his immediate recorded reaction according to Sanjaya's narration?
Sanjaya reports that upon seeing the word is dudha, meaning having seen or observing this organized Pandava formation,
Yes.
Duryodhana takes an immediate, purposeful action. The source uses the word tada, which means then or at that time. It explicitly links his observation directly to his very next move.
Well, it's causal. Seeing their readiness directly causes him to do something.
Exactly. His action is presented as a direct consequence, a reaction to witnessing their preparedness. He doesn't just stand there contemplating.
It prompts an immediate response. Okay, so what does he do? Does he shout an order? Does he draw his weapon?
No, something quite different, actually. His very next step, as Sanjaya reports it, is to approach his teacher.
Approach his teacher.
Yes. He goes, Upasagamya approaches, goes near to Zakaryam, his teacher.
And that teacher is?
Drona. Acharya Drona.
Drona. Okay, let's pause there. What's Drona's significance in this whole setup? Remind us, based on the source notes.
Well, the analysis points out Drona isn't just anybody. He's, first and foremost, Duryodhana's revered teacher, his guru in the art of warfare.
The one who taught him military strategy, archery.
All of it. But crucially, he's also one of the principal, most respected, and frankly most powerful commanders within the Kuru army itself. A key general on Duryodhana's side.
So Duryodhana, seeing the enemy formation, his immediate reaction isn't to talk to just any commander or maybe his brothers. He makes a beeline for Drona, his former teacher, now a top general in his own army.
Correct, at this absolutely critical moment, just before hostilities commence.
What does that specific action seeking out Drona right after seeing the Pandava formation suggest? What does the analysis imply about this move?
It strongly suggests a couple things. One, that Duryodhana is likely seeking counsel, or perhaps validation, or maybe even needs to express some concern.
Okay.
Leaders often turn to their most trusted advisors or mentors, especially those with deep expertise, at points of high stakes or perceived challenge. Seeing the enemy looking so organized and ready might have sparked something in him.
Like a sudden realization or a strategic question.
Perhaps. It implies he has an observation, maybe a doubt, maybe a strategic thought, spurred by that sight of the Pandava Vyuha. And he feels the immediate need to share it, process it, or maybe get tactical input from Drona. Right then, before the battle truly gets underway.
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it? That his first instinct, his first recorded action after seeing the enemy poised for battle is consultation, and specifically with his teacher. It offers a really telling glimpse into his maybe state of mind or his strategic priorities at that precise instant.
It certainly highlights the significance of Drona in his eyes, both as a mentor and a military asset.
So he approaches Drona, Upasagamya. What does Sanjaya say happens next once Duryodhana reaches his teacher?
The narration continues. It tells us that after approaching Drona, Duryodhana begins to speak.
Begins to speak.
Yes, the phrase used in the source is vakanam abravit.
Vakanam abravit. And what does that translate to, essentially?
It means he uttered words or spoke a sentence or simply began a conversation.
Okay, so he initiated the dialogue.
Exactly. Sanjaya records the fact that the conversation started right there on the battlefield between Duryodhana and Drona, triggered by the sight of the Pandava army.
Now, this feels like a really crucial point, and I remember the source analysis emphasized this quite heavily, right? Where does this particular source excerpt, the one we're focused on, actually leave us in the narrative?
Yes, this is absolutely vital to understand about the scope of this specific piece of the source material and its analysis. While it meticulously details the entire lead-up.
You mean the setting, Sanjaya narrating, seeing the Pandavas ready, Duryodhana observing that, him going straight to Drona.
Exactly. All of that. It tells us he approached Drona and he started speaking Vakanam abravit. But, and this is the key point, the provided text and the accompanying analysis, they stop right there. It tells us the conversation began, but the actual content of what Duryodhana said to his teacher Drona at that absolutely pivotal moment, that information is not contained within this specific passage or the analysis we have in front of us.
So we're brought right up to the threshold of this critical exchange, this potentially strategy-defining conversation. But this particular source deliberately cuts off there. It focuses on the action of initiating the dialogue rather than the words themselves.
Precisely. It emphasizes the event of the consultation beginning. Prompted, as we said, by the sight of the enemy's readiness, it highlights the significance of the act of speaking itself in that context.
That's fascinating, actually. It really builds the tension, doesn't it? You see the trigger, that perfectly arrayed army. You see the immediate reaction to the Duryodhana making a move. You see the key figure. He consults his powerful teacher, Drona. And you see the very moment the words begin to flow.
Yeah.
But the source excerpt holds back on what those words are. It leaves you hanging, wondering about the strategic or maybe even emotional core of that initial exchange.
It certainly does. It underscores the importance placed on that moment of consultation itself, that decision to speak to Drona then and there, even if the specifics of what was said are, reserved for the subsequent narration in the full original text, which isn't part of our source material for this deep dive.
Okay, so let's step back for a second and look at this whole sequence, this snapshot, purely based on what this source excerpt and its analysis have shown us. We have Sanjaya setting the scene, observing the Pandava army expertly formed up, Visha. Duryodhana sees this demonstrated readiness. He reacts immediately, goes directly to his teacher and key commander, Drona, and he begins to speak, Vakanam abravit. What are the main takeaways? What insights can we really glean just from this specific sequence?
Well, based strictly on this sequence, as laid out in the notes,
Yeah.
I think several important things stand out. First, it really underscores the tactical importance of observation and assessment, especially right before, a major undertaking like a battle.
Right. You need to know what you're up against.
Exactly. Seeing the opponent's preparedness is shown as the direct trigger for Duryodhana's next action. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that the state of your opponent or the challenge you're facing demands immediate attention and can, or perhaps should, dictate your very next move.
So it's not just about having your own grand plan locked down. It's also about critically assessing the other side's readiness, their posture, and letting that inform your immediate actions, your adjustment.
Precisely. That real-time assessment is key. Second takeaway. It highlights the significance of seeking counsel, particularly from trusted figures, experts, mentors, especially at those really critical junctures. Duryodhana doesn't just charge forward impulsively based on what he saw, nor does he just start shouting random orders down the line. His documented action is to turn to Drona.
Which suggests what?
Well, it suggests a recognition, at least in this depicted moment, of the need for strategic input. Or maybe he needs reassurance. Or maybe he needs to refine his approach based on this new visual data the enemy looks ready. So he consults the expert.
So the source shows us a leader's response isn't always just immediate action, but can also be reflection and consultation, seeking wisdom before acting.
Right, and perhaps the most significant insight for me from this specific passage is its intense focus on the prelude, the moments before the storm.
Yeah, we haven't heard about any arrows flying yet.
Not a single one. This isn't the war starting. It's a moment of incredibly high tension, yes. But it's characterized by strategic observation and this crucial private interaction that's happening right on the cusp of total war.
Okay.
It really shows that the moments before the physical conflict erupts are charged with their own kind of strategic and psychological weight. The source deliberately chooses to highlight this specific interaction, seeing the enemy ready, approaching the advisor, starting the conversation as the critical beat, the significant event, just before everything breaks loose.
So it really sets the stage then. It helps us understand the potential motivations or the concerns or maybe the initial strategic thinking happening on Duryodhana's side. And it's all triggered simply by the Pandavas lining up properly for battle.
Exactly. It emphasizes that these moments of preparation, observation, and the reactions they provoke are just as much a part of the unfolding story, just as significant perhaps as the actual clash of arms that follows.
It really frames the beginning of the conflict, not just as armies meeting, but as this moment of assessment and consultation on one side.
Precisely. This passage, by focusing so tightly on Duryodhana's observation and his immediate approach to Drona, it zeroes in on that internal response through the leader's reaction to the external display of the enemy's readiness and the crucial decision to consult before that first arrow flies.
Yeah.
It's a snapshot of leadership under pressure, right at 0 hour.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up this deep dive into this specific piece of source material, we've really dissected a singular, powerful moment. We're on the Kurukshetra field, the air crackling just as the armies are formed up. We're seeing it through Sanjaya's report to Dhritarashtra, and the focus is sharp. Duryodhana observes the well-arrayed Pandava forces. He reacts instantly to their visible preparedness. And his first move is to go directly to his teacher and top commander, Drona.
And crucially, as we've stressed, the source brings us right to that charged point where Duryodhana opens his mouth. He begins his conversation with Drona Vakanam Abravit. This specific passage deliberately leaves us right there, hanging in anticipation.
Yeah.
It really highlights the immense significance attributed to that unrevealed dialogue, that exchange between the leader and his key advisor, happening literally on the very brink of this monumental, world-altering conflict.
It absolutely gives you pause, doesn't it? Thinking about the source focusing so intensely on this pre-battle sequence, the observation, the assessment, the seeking of counsel. It really makes you consider how often in life, or in any significant undertaking, really, how much the outcome might be shaped not just by the main event, the battle itself, but by those crucial observations we make, the immediate reactions we have, and maybe most importantly, those quiet, critical conversations we have in the moments just before everything truly begins.
That's a powerful thought. What are the arrayed armies in our own lives, the challenges we see forming up?
Right. And do they cause us to pause, to really look, to assess? And who are the dronas we turn to, the trusted advisors we seek out before we make our move, before we engage?
A very thought-provoking question to carry away.
Indeed. Well, thank you for walking us through that fascinating piece of source material. And thank you all for joining us for this depth dive.